Well, Garrett, you know him well as I did. Talk about the effect on the Senate. And he said he thinks he will have the ability, he's confident he will have the ability to choose his successor, which I assume would be Senator Thune.
Well, let's take this one step at a time here. I mean, this is the most consequential and probably controversial Senate leader of modern history, if not the history of the body. He has served in this chamber longer than I have been alive. He's the longest serving party leader in either party, plus a year. I mean, he continues to add to this. And I think I could make an argument that he's responsible for the current makeup of the Supreme Court, the election of Donald Trump, and the failure of the Senate to convict Donald Trump in his second impeachment, sort of three touchstone political moments of the last 10 years that have Mitch McConnell's fingerprints on them, and that's just from sitting here thinking about it during the course of his speech. Enormously consequential. I think about the timing of his remarks, the idea that he said he wanted to leave essentially with a clean conscience of the work he's been doing. He has been laser focused over the last 5 months or so on making sure that Ukraine gets the aid it needs to keep up its fight. We know that he talked about that in the meeting with the president yesterday. We know that passing this supplemental through the Senate, obviously not the last step in that drama, was an important moment for him, kind of leading him up to this moment. And then he describes what's going to happen next. He says he's staying in the Senate through the end of his term, so he would be leaving in January of 2027. He ends the leadership role in November of this year with his goal, he said, of handing over the leadership position to a Republican majority leader, meaning he will do everything that he can to help make sure Republicans take back the majority this year. Whom that leader will be now will become a subject of intense speculation and a lot of behind-the-scenes arm twisting. Remember, that leader is elected only by Senate Republicans behind closed doors. The three most likely people, and you'll hear this shorthand over the next several months quite often, are the three Johns. All three have served in Senate leadership in some capacity. John Cornyn, who was the Senate Majority Whip under McConnell until the last cycle here. John Thune, who is the current Minority Whip, the current #2 Republican, and John Barrasso of Wyoming, the current #3 Republican. All have bases of support within the modern Republican Party, and all have kind of different degrees of MAGA to them. It's probably not an accident that John Thune, the current Senate #2, and very much a Trump skeptic, let's say, himself, endorsed Donald Trump just over this past weekend. John Cornyn did so right around the time that the former president won the Iowa caucus. And John Barrasso of Wyoming, certainly the most MAGA-friendly of that group, was an early Trump supporter in this particular race and has been very quick to put his thumb on the scale in favor of Trumpy Senate candidates like Kari Lake in Arizona, for example. So that kind of jockeying, probably the most important election with the fewest voters in America, the efforts to attain that position will start right now. Although, frankly, they probably started at the beginning of this Congress, if not sooner, as Mitch McConnell's health problems became more apparent, and simply the fact, as McConnell says himself, Father Time is undefeated. He could not and would not stay in this position forever. Andrea?
We have breaking news in the New York civil fraud case against former President Trump. A source with direct knowledge tells NBC News that a letter containing a white powder was sent to Manhattan Supreme Court Judge ArthurEngoron at his chambers today. Now, we should say that Engoron's mail is pre-screened every day, so everyone in the office is considered safe. But that news came right after Trump's lawyer said in a nearly 1,800-page motion that he will only be posting a $100 million bond, which is far below the $464 million ordered by Engoron. MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin has the latest. Can we just first talk about this white powder?
Yeah.
It seems like almost everyone who has a high-profile position related to one of the Trump cases has a scare, a threat, phone calls, people showing up at their house. This is serious stuff.
This is incredibly serious stuff. And The New York DA's office has sort of compiled a record of all of those threats in order to support their own motion for a gag order in advance of their trial. This is just yet another entry in their compendium of the series of threats, verbal and otherwise, launched at participants in these various processes, Chris.
All right. $464 million is what was ordered by Engoron, the amount of money that he said should have to be paid, but also this interest that has been accruing daily, right? Can you just say, first of all, I know you want $464 million bond, but I'll give you $100 million, and here's why?
No, you're not supposed to. And in particular, there is law that governs how much the bond or undertaking is supposed to be, whereas here, a judgment directs the payment of a sum of money. That bond is supposed to be equivalent to, if not greater than, the sum of money that you've been directed to pay. The Trump people acknowledge this. They say that, normally speaking, they would have to pay, I'm going to read you from the brief, to account for post-judgment interest and appeal cost, a surety, meaning an insurer that usually posts these kinds of bonds, will often set the bond amount at 120% of the judgment or more, i.e. more than $550 million. They acknowledge in the ordinary course that would be how much they would be required to put up. And then they have a creative argument. And their creative argument is, we don't object to the independent monitor that's already been appointed here, was appointed in November of 22, to stay in her job, because if that was enough to assure the Attorney General that everything would stay in place and the assets would retain their value, then, pre-trial, why shouldn't it be enough afterwards, plus $100 million that we're willing to put up?
Mitch McConnell can't stand Donald Trump. He knows that he is someone who isn't a serious person, but he's willing to do this, which is like, if McConnell comes out and endorses Trump, what that does is that once again, it opens up the others in the Senate and other donors to say that Donald Trump is someone we can still support, despite everything he's done. I mean, the day Mitch McConnell endorses Donald Trump, you might as well write the obituary for the Republican Party, because it is dead and buried from any image and likeness in which that you and I, the party that we joined, or the party that Reagan was the leader of, or the party that Bill Buckley said we're supposed to be as conservatives, the ones that yell stop athwart history when no one else will. That party is dead and gone. Because, my God, could you be any more of a cat?
We know what it means.
Many of the elements.
Liar.
Many of the elements.
Liar. Liar. Liar.
We're here to listen.
Liar. You're a liar.
We're here to listen.
Liar.
There'll be time for questions.
You are guilty and got blood on your hands.
That was a short time ago, that noisy protest there in Athens, Georgia, as the mayor was holding a news conference on immigration and community safety following the murder of nursing student Laken Riley. Madison Scarpino's been on this story from the beginning. She's live in Athens this morning. Quite a moment there as the mayor tried to lay out plans to tighten security in the area.
Yeah, that's right, Sandra. The mayor was determined to keep the focus on some potential new safety measures here in Athens, but it was quickly overshadowed by protesters repeatedly interrupting. Take a listen to one of them.
Who voted to make Athens, Clark County a sanctuary city, sir? Who? What's their name?
I'm an old man. My ears can only hear one thing at a time, so I'm asking you, Claudia.
We want to ask questions, too.
They were holding signs that said things like justice for Laken, blood on your hands. They were yelling things like, this is an invasion. You are lawless, Mr. Mayor. We've had enough. And my producer, Claudia Kelly-Bazan, actually asked the mayor directly, you know, what do you have to say to these protesters? And here's what he had to say.
Your hands, justice for Laken Riley.
I'd say trauma affects all of us. And I understand in the wake of a great tragedy like this, we were all deeply hurt. And everybody expresses their hurt differently.
we talked to some of these protesters after things wrapped up, and I asked them, you know, what do you want to see? What change do you want to happen? And they said the main thing they want is there's a resolution that was passed in 2019 supporting the immigrant community here in Athens, and they tell me that they want that retracted and they want the mayor to resign. Sandra?
So real quick, last week I caught up with a mom of a university student who had her daughter come home because she was so fearful of what was happening there. What are you hearing from the community there and students who are trying to get back to their normal?
Sandra, I got to tell you, since we've been here from the beginning, we've talked to many students, we've talked to people just walking out in the community in Athens, people who are just from here. They all say that it's a really odd feeling and they're just overwhelmed by shock. You mentioned that mother who was upset. We talked to a father who came to town to Athens right after this murder happened because he just didn't want his daughter to be alone. So that feeling hasn't gone away as the days go on for people here in Athens.
All right, Madison Scarpino on that story for us. Madison, thank you.
New figures from the European Union's asylum agency show there's been a sharp rise in the number of people seeking refuge inside the bloc. The agency said that in 2023 there was an 18% increase on the previous year, with 1.1 million people seeking protection. The non-European Union countries of Norway and Switzerland saw similar increases. Germany continues to get the highest number of applications, more than 330,000. People from Syria and Afghanistan make up the bulk of claims. Well, earlier I spoke to our Berlin correspondent Jessica Parker, who's been looking at the figures and gave me this analysis.
What we've heard from the EU Asylum Agency is that over the course of 2023, more than 1.1 million people applied for asylum, so protection, having left their home country over the course of the year. Now, that is the highest figure in 7 years. So that takes us really right back to the end of the migration crisis that many people will remember. And the figures, if you break them down, they're quite interesting. Some of it isn't terribly surprising about where people are coming from. So number one are Syrians. They've lodged the most applications, and that is up compared to 2022 by quite a substantial amount, 38%. Afghans, people leaving Afghanistan and coming to Europe, they're the second highest number of people lodging asylum applications. And then actually also, though, if you look high up the list as well, is Turkish nationals lodging over 100,000 applications, many of them here in Germany. There's a big Turkish community here in Germany. So it's a mix of nationalities, people saying, of course, fleeing war or persecution, lodging those claims. But what it has done is put quite a strain on the system here in Germany and in other parts of Europe. And something the EU Asylum Agency says is that also because Europe has taken over 4 million Ukrainians as part of a separate scheme. I mean, that's different to these asylum application figures, but altogether it's creating a massive strain on the system as they try and process these asylum applications. And there is now a very big backlog.
Jessica Parker there.